The autumn leaves were turning golden when David Harrison decided to take the long way home through Millfield Woods. At 43, he had learned to appreciate these quiet moments between his demanding work schedule and his responsibilities as a single father to 8-year-old Emma. David adjusted his navy blue suit jacket as he walked along the familiar path. His dark hair showed the first touches of silver at the temples, and his beard was neatly trimmed. The look of a man who had built his software company from nothing, but now found success, felt hollow without someone to share it with. The sound reached him before he saw anything, a soft sobbing that seemed to echo through the tall oaks and maples. David paused, listening carefully. As a father, he had developed an instinct for distress, and something about this cry tugged at his heart. Following the sound deeper into the woods, David came upon a sight that stopped him in his tracks. There, chained to an ancient oak tree, sat a young woman in what appeared to be a wedding dress. The white silk gown was torn and stained with dirt, and her blonde hair fell in disheveled waves around her shoulders. "Oh my God," David whispered, rushing forward. "Miss, are you hurt?" The woman looked up with tear-filled eyes, and David could see she was perhaps in her late 20s, with the kind of beauty that came from kindness rather than just good features. Her face showed exhaustion and fear, but also a quiet strength that reminded him of his late wife. "Please," she said, her voice from crying. I don't know who you are, but please don't leave me here." David knelt beside her, examining the heavy chain that secured her to the tree. "My name is David Harrison." "What's yours, Catherine?" she replied, wrapping her arms around herself. "Catherine Wells." I was supposed to be married today, but her voice broke. But what Catherine David's voice was gentle, the same tone he used when Emma had nightmares. "My fiancé, he found out I couldn't have children. He said I was worthless to him, that I deceived him. He brought me here and left me." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. David felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, the same protective instinct that had driven him to work 18-hour days to provide for Emma after his wife's passing. But he kept his voice calm and reassuring. "Well, Catherine, first things first. Let's get you free from this chain." David examined the lock more closely. It was old, but sturdy. "I'm going to have to go back to my truck and get some tools. Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Catherine nodded, though David could see the fear in her eyes at the thought of being alone again. "I promise you I will be right back. You have my word." David looked directly into her eyes as he spoke, and something in his steady gaze seemed to calm her. David hurried back through the woods to where he'd parked his pickup truck. In the toolbox, he found a sturdy pair of bolt cutters. As he walked back, he thought about Catherine's situation, and his heart ached for her pain. When he returned, Catherine looked up with visible relief. "You came back." "Of course I came back," David said simply, positioning the bolt cutters on the chain. "When someone needs help, you help them. That's what my father taught me." With a sharp crack, the chain gave way. Catherine rubbed her wrists where the metal had chafed, and David helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Easy there. When's the last time you ate something? Yesterday morning," Catherine admitted before the ceremony was supposed to happen. David nodded thoughtfully. "My truck's just through those trees. Let me take you somewhere safe. Get you some food." As they walked slowly through the woods, Catherine glanced at David with curiosity. "You're being very kind to a complete stranger. Most people would think this situation was too strange, too complicated." David was quiet for a moment, helping her navigate around a fallen log. "My wife used to say that life has a way of putting people in our path when we need them most. Maybe you needed someone to find you today. Maybe I needed to find you too." They reached David's truck, and he helped Catherine into the passenger seat. As they drove toward town, she noticed the child's car seat in the back and a small pink backpack. "You have a daughter?" David smiled and his whole face softened. "Emma, she's 8, lost her mother 3 years ago to cancer." "I'm sorry," Catherine said quietly. "That must have been incredibly difficult. It still is some days. But Emma, she's taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry love forward." David took Catherine to Martha's Diner, a warm, family-owned restaurant, where the owner, Martha herself, didn't bat an eye at the sight of a woman in a torn wedding dress. She simply brought Catherine a plate of comfort food and a cup of hot coffee. "Now then, honey," Martha said in her motherly way, "you eat up while I find you something more practical to wear." As Catherine ate, David called his housekeeper to let her know he'd be late picking up Emma from school. Then he sat across from Catherine, nursing his own coffee. "So what happens now?" Catherine asked. "I don't really have anywhere to go. My family, they disowned me when I chose to marry him, said he was beneath us." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out they were right, just not in the way they thought." David studied her face carefully. "Catherine, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "When you found out you couldn't have children, how did that make you feel about yourself?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Broken," she finally whispered. "Like I wasn't a real woman, like I had nothing to offer anyone." David leaned forward. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear me. A person's worth isn't measured by what they can or can't do. It's measured by who they are inside, by how they treat others, by the love they have to give." Catherine looked up at him through her tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because 3 years ago I was convinced. My life was over. I thought I had nothing left to offer anyone, especially my daughter. But Emma taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, being kind, being willing to try again each day." Martha returned with a simple blue dress and some comfortable shoes. "These should fit you, dear. My daughter left them here." Catherine changed in the restaurant's restroom, and when she emerged, David was struck by how different she looked. The fear was still there, but underneath it was a quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength. "I should probably find a hotel for tonight," Catherine said, though uncertainty filled her voice. David was quiet for a moment, then made a decision that surprised even him. "Catherine, I have a guest room at my house. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. You're welcome to stay until you figure out what you want to do next." Catherine stared at him. "You would do that? You don't even know me. I know you're someone who needed help, and you're someone who deserves kindness. That's enough for me." That evening, David picked up Emma from school and gently explained that they had a house guest who was going through a difficult time. Emma, with the pure acceptance that children possess, simply asked if Catherine liked mac and cheese. Over dinner, David watched as Catherine and Emma talked about favorite books and movies. Emma's easy chatter seemed to lift some of the sadness from Catherine's eyes, and David felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense of his family being complete. Later, after Emma was in bed, David and Catherine sat on the front porch, listening to the evening sounds of crickets and distant traffic. Catherine said softly, "Why are you doing this?" Really, David was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the stars. 3 years ago, I was so focused on just surviving each day that I forgot what it meant to really live. Today, when I found you in those woods, I remembered something important." "What's that?" "That sometimes the most broken places in our hearts are where the light gets in. You were chained to that tree, but you weren't defeated. That takes a special kind of strength." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. "I don't feel very strong. The strongest people I know rarely do," David replied. My wife used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and choosing to keep going anyway. Over the following weeks, Catherine became part of their daily routine. She helped Emma with homework-cooked meals that filled the house with warmth and slowly began to heal from the trauma of that day in the woods. And David found himself looking forward to coming home in a way he hadn't since his wife's death. One evening, about a month after he'd found her, Catherine approached David as he was reading in his study. "I got a job offer today," she said quietly. "Teaching at the elementary school. It's what I did before I met him." David looked up from his book. "That's wonderful, Catherine. You'll be a great teacher. I wanted to ask you something." She continued, her voice uncertain. "Would it be all right if I stayed a little longer? I know I've been here too long already, but Emma and I have grown close, and I—" David stood up and gently took her hands. "Catherine, you're not imposing. You're family now. Emma loves you, and so do I." The words hung in the air between them, and Catherine felt her heart skip a beat. "David, I know it's complicated," he said softly. "I know we both have scars, but sometimes two broken pieces can fit together in a way that makes them both whole again." Catherine smiled through her tears. "Your wife was right, about people being put in our path when we need them most." 6 months later, on a warm spring day, David and Catherine were married in Martha's Diner, surrounded by the small community that had embraced their unconventional love story. Emma stood beside Catherine, as her maid of honor beaming with joy. As they exchanged vows, David thought about that day in the woods when he'd found Catherine chained to the tree. He had thought he was rescuing her, but in truth, she had rescued him too from a life of just going through the motions, from believing that his capacity for love had died with his first wife. Sometimes David realized the greatest acts of kindness are the ones that end up blessing the giver as much as the receiver. And sometimes when two hearts that have known loss find each other, they create something even more beautiful than what came.